back.
He promises to bless Ishmael. I agree with that. He promises to make him a great nation. I agree with that. But the covenant, the everlasting covenant, is through Isaac. That's not according to me, that's according to the scriptures and the very passage that Zakir was using to support his position. The everlasting covenant is through Isaac. Isaac.
All right, everyone, chill.
Let's get to, I think, Genesis 17, where David Wood quoted that it will only be with Isaac. But actually, I think this chapter is going to prove otherwise, because, yes, in the English translation, as you read it in the NIV, it might seem like that, but the Hebrew is slightly different. Before I get to that, I'd just like to emphasize something. In verse number 10, this is what God says. This is my covenant with you and your descendants after you, the covenant you are to keep. Every male among you shall be circumcised. Now this is before Isaac was born. So when God told him to circumcise, at that time, who did God have in mind? Ishmael was in Abraham's household, and God told Abraham to circumcise Ishmael as a sign of the covenant. Then in the middle of the passage, chapter, it says in 21, but my covenant I was established with Isaac. So all of a sudden, God saying this only with Isaac, allegedly. But then after this passage, in verse 23, it says, and that very day Abraham took his son Ishmael and all those born in his household, or brought with his money, and circumcised them as God told him. So wait a minute. 1 minute God tells Abraham, circumcise all those in your household, which includes Ishmael, as a sign of the covenant. Then the next minute, God tells Abraham that it's only with Isaac, and then after that, Ishmael is circumcised as the sign of the covenant. Why would Ishmael be circumcised? Why would God order that if he's not part of the covenant, when circumcision is the sign of the covenant? It does not make any sense. I'll tell you what's going on. Verse 21, when it says, but my covenant I will establish with Isaac, the word before Isaac in Hebrew is et, which according to Strong's Concordance can mean together with. Once is translated as together with. This is how this passage can read. Then God said, yes, but your wife Sarah will bear you a son, and you will call him Isaac. I will establish my covenant with him as an everlasting covenant for his descendants after him. And as for Ishmael, I have heard you. I will surely bless him. I will make him fruitful and will greatly increase his numbers. He will be the father of 12 rulers, and I will make him into a great nation. But my covenant I will establish together with Isaac, whom Sarah will bear to you by this time next year. Once the Hebrew word et is translated as together, it makes sense. Before Isaac is born, God tells Abraham to circumcise Ishmael as a sign of the covenant. Then Isaac is born, and God makes it clear that the covenant is with both of them, and that's why Abraham circumcised Ishmael. So they would have to explain, what is the point of God ordering Abraham to circumcise Ishmael as a sign of the covenant if Ishmael is not part of the covenant? That does not make sense at all.
And again, all the passages that we looked at, God says to Abraham, through your descendants, all the nations of the world are going to be blessed. And then he says the exact same thing to Isaac. Through your descendants, all the nations of the world are going to be blessed. Then he says the same thing to Jacob. Through your descendants are all the nations of the world going to be blessed. Does he say this about Ishmael? No.
La 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 la.
To Isaac, to Isaac, to Isaac, to Isaac. Through your descendants, all the nations of the world are going to be blessed.
Allow me to break the ice.
It continues with Isaac's line, then to Jacob. Yes, because the Old Testament and the Bible was written by Jews. It's a Jewish historical book.
To Isaac, to Isaac.
Yes, because the Old Testament and the Bible was written by Jews. It's a Jewish historical book, so there's no need for them to speak about anything else. Our Quran, it speaks about an Arabian prophet, Shuaib from Madian, who some Muslim commentators believe was the father-in-law of Moses. If you quotes proof text after proof text that says it's only with Isaac, you get this other proof showing that God's got plans for Ishmael, and there's something up. He also has to address my point about the word et. He has to tell us that the word et is not there in Genesis chapter 17, and if it is there, he's got to tell us it can't be translated as together with.
has made quite a bit out of the fact that Ishmael was circumcised. So was everyone in Abraham's household. So were the servants, every male in his household. Everyone who was with him was circumcised. Does this mean that they are all part of the covenant? Well, now we're equivocating on what the covenant is. He said et should be translated as together. I know you can look up in a dictionary and find all kinds of meanings, but no one translates the passage that way. Why? Because it makes absolutely no sense in context. It makes absolutely no sense that God is putting all of this emphasis on Isaac, that Ishmael is being expelled from the house. Think about it. According to Zakher's interpretation, this covenant is equally, at least, with Isaac and with Ishmael. Probably even greater emphasis on Ishmael, since the ultimate fulfillment through Muhammad is going to come through Ishmael. Why? Well, get out of here, Ishmael. I'm focusing on Isaac. Why?
And the Bible was written by Jews.
Why?
It's a Jewish historical book.
Why?
And the Bible was written by Jews.
Why? That's why it makes absolutely no sense in the context.
So who are you, man?
I'm the party pooper.
According to the Quran, God was going to send a prophet, scripture, and the pilgrimage to Makkah to the descendants of Ishmael. I quoted off the top of my head Genesis chapter 17. I quoted Isaiah 42. I quoted Isaiah chapter 60. I quoted Psalms 84. And I quoted Deuteronomy chapter 33. That all confirm that a prophet, scripture, and pilgrimage is going to come to the descendants of Ishmael. As long as these texts cannot be refuted, then everything David Wood has said is void. He can quote any passage from Genesis that says it's only with Isaac, but then he'll have to explain, if Ishmael is not part of the covenant, why is God going to send a prophet, scripture, and pilgrimage to Makkah according to his own Bible? So wait a minute.
Well, hey there, YouTube. My name's Matthew. This is Cookbooks, and today I'm actually wanting to take a look at Genesis chapter 17. Verse 21, I disagree with this right here. It says, "But my covenant I will establish with Isaac, whom Sarah will bear to you at this time next year." That is not the word but. Va'et means and then there's a conjunction right there, okay? Or a direct object is what I mean.
Come with me if you want.
La 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 la, la 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 la, la 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 la.
God is putting all of this emphasis on Isaac.
La 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 la, la 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 la.
How come? How come? What games are you people playing?
So, that word but does not mean va'et. Just letting you know, it means and. It says, "And my covenant I will establish with Isaac, whom Sarah will bear to you at this time next year." And Ishmael, his son, was 13 years old when he was circumcised. That means he's a part of the covenant also, guys. It says, "But my covenant I will establish with Isaac." That is ridiculous to say, because they are both a part of the covenant. God says that all of his offspring will be blessed. Nobody got kicked out of the covenant unless they do not get circumcised. Va'et means and.
But my covenant I will establish together with Isaac.
This is what happens. Allah describes it to us in the Holy Quran. بَلْ نَقْذِفُ بِالْحَقِّ عَلَى الْبَاطِلِ. When truth is hurled against falsehood, it knocks out its brains. It knocks out its brains.
ربنا واجعلنا مسلمين لك ومن ذريتنا أمة مسلمة لك وأرنا مناسكنا وتب علينا إنك أنت التواب الرحيم. ربنا وابعث فيهم رسولا منهم يتلو عليهم آياتك ويعلمهم الكتاب والحكمة ويزكيهم إنك أنت العزيز الحكيم